Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Survivor's Guide to Thriving podcast. I'm Amanda Solman, and along with Mark Duel, your host for this show and the creator of the Surviving to Thriving movement. Each week, we'll dive into the mindsets that keep us in survival mode and learn how to get on the path to a truly thriving life. If you're looking for a wake-up call and want some valuable tools to get there, you have come to the right place. After all, survival is dead. It's your time to thrive today. Now, let's head over to the show.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Survivor's Guide to Thriving podcast. This is Mark Duel, your host and founder of the Surviving to Thriving movement. Welcome to the movement that is helping people in the world, especially here in America, stop surviving and start thriving in their life. Today, my friends, we are talking about a very important topic facing America's workplace today. Frankly, I think this has hit crisis level. This is something I hear about constantly from our participants, constantly from the companies that we do work with, from the highest levels of some of the biggest companies and most recognized brands, all the way down to somebody who just started their job 3 months ago. And it sounds something like this. My boss thinks that he's giving me feedback, but I haven't heard from him in 2 weeks. My boss thinks that he's giving me feedback, but I haven't heard from him in like 2 weeks. My friends, what's going on in the workplace today is an extreme disconnect between the generations in the workplace and what feedback should look like in the workplace today. So I'm going to take this from 2 different angles and kind of talk to both groups. And hopefully, whether you're a baby boomer, Gen Xer, millennial, wherever you tend to fall on that spectrum, hopefully you'll start to get what's going on as it pertains to feedback in the workplace today. So first of all, let me just say, whenever I go out and speak and do keynotes, we always have the audience kind of talk about what are some of the things that they experienced growing up. And so what I do is I have them raise their hands. And when I have a room full of baby boomers, I ask them to raise their hands and say, how many of you have millennial children? And most of them raise their hands, or millennial grandchildren. Most of them will have their hands up. So if the room was 100% baby boomers, 90% would have their hands in the air. And so what happens is I ask them, so how many of you were there for all of your children's football games, basketball games, soccer meets, livestock shows, FFA contests, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? You were there for the dance recital. You were there for the choir concerts. You were there for all the different things that your kids are participating in. And almost all the hands will stay up. Guys, gals, doesn't matter. Almost all the hands will stay up. And then I'll ask them, so when you were growing up, what percentage of you had your dad or your mom at every single event growing up? And there's this thud in the room because most of the hands, like 90% of the hands that were left up go down, but maybe like 10 to 20%, had somebody there, a parent, grandparent, mom, dad, somebody who was there at their events. And so this is one of the interesting observations that I've made about the different generations in the workplace. See, when baby boomers were growing up, guys, when you were coming of age, when you were kind of growing up in your neighborhood, more than likely as a baby boomer, you were allowed to go and play. As long as you were back by supper time, nobody was really concerned about where you were. There was a lot of different expectations around watching your kids and hovering over the kids and being aware of where they were at all times. Let's look at what the millennials experienced growing up in the 80s and 90s and to some extent early 2000s, depending on where you draw the line. So when millennials were growing up, we were experiencing a very different level of interaction from your parents. And those of us on the older end of the millennial generation, kind of 28, 29 and older, up to about 36 right now, we may have had a little bit more freedom and flexibility, but still a fair amount of interaction. And somebody was typically there at those events, kind of paying attention to where you were most of the time, giving you approval on whether you should do certain things or hang out with a certain group of friends, etc. And on the younger end of the millennial generation, the 28, 27 and under, down to about 20 right now, we saw a lot of interaction, heavy interaction. God forbid that the kids should be able to go out and play outside without having somebody watch them all the time. So here's what happened. As the millennials were being raised, we were given constant feedback and updates about where we stood almost on a daily basis. When baby boomers were coming of age, that wasn't necessarily the case. You were allowed some freedoms to go out and create and explore and screw up and try to cover your ass or whatever the situation was if you were getting in trouble. But you had a lot more freedom and flexibility to go out without adult supervision. So let's translate this now into the workplace. The baby boomers have been the single most industrious, productive, foundation building generation in America ever, period. There's never been a generation that was more productive than them. The millennials now coming into the workplace, my belief is this, and this is for another episode that we're going to talk about the importance of the millennial generation. My belief is that the millennials will be the next most important generation. However, one of the disconnects that we're having in the workplace, while boomers are still leading the workplaces largely, and millennials are now moving into leadership, they're moving into positions, and they're taking on these roles, is a disconnect on the amount of feedback. Why? Because when we were kids, we had constant feedback. And now we go into the American workforce, which is largely designed by the baby boomer generation, and the feedback loop, typically, depending on the culture within your individual company, the feedback loop tends to disappear. So when baby boomers were getting feedback as a young employee in their 20s, if you were getting feedback from your boss, it's probably because you screwed something up. And if you didn't hear from the boss, the chances are that you were performing and you were doing well, so they didn't need to talk to you. Now, in the millennial's mind, if I'm not getting feedback, I must be screwing something up, because the only time that I didn't get feedback from my mom or dad or whoever was raising me was when I was getting the silent treatment. Okay, so these are the two stories. It could be the exact same scenario. It could be the exact same success or failure within the workplace, but it is perceived differently by baby boomers than it is by millennials, and vice versa. So I was in this conversation with somebody who's looking to come to one of our Millennial Mastermind programs next year. And the comment that she made, and she's 24 years old, the comment that she made is that I go through my work day and I'm working hard, I'm trying to perform, but I don't know where I stand. My boss thinks that he's giving me feedback, but I haven't heard from him in 2 weeks. Right? So there's a disconnect between the level of expectation for how much, because I'm going to be very blunt with you, baby boomers that may listen into this. The millennials need more input. We need more feedback. We need more approval and coaching on where we could do better. It's not that millennials are completely shut down to learning that they didn't do something right. It's not about just getting the participation ribbon. That's not what it's about, but it's about knowing where they stand. One of the things that we know about human cognitive development is that about 95% of the hardwiring that drives your patterns, which create your preferences, happens before you turn 8 years old. That was true for baby boomers, and that's true for millennials. So with that rule in place, the way that you were raised, with the level of feedback and input that you had in your life before you turned 8 years old, whatever was going on in your environment, has a lot to do with what level of feedback you need in the workplace today. So if I'm a millennial, and up to that point in my life, I had a lot of feedback, and then it was further solidified as I went through my junior high and high school years, and I come into the workplace, and all of a sudden that feedback loop that used to be there on a daily basis disappears, I'm going to start telling a story that says, I'm not good enough. I'm not performing. I don't know what I'm doing. And guys, fortunately or unfortunately, I haven't decided which one yet. One thing that we know for sure is that to some extent, millennials were handheld and they were given approval before they made a decision just about every day of their life. And that is in contrast to baby boomers. You may have had to make a decision and live or die with the consequences. And that is just how it was. So we've protected millennials, maybe a little bit too much. You know, you can make it wrong. It is what it is. It's just the way that this generation, by and large, making a blanket statement, and with a few segments that may be separate from that, by and large, that's the way this generation exists. And that there are 81 million of them just in America. So if you think you're going to change them by drawing the hard line and being a hard ass, you're going to be hurt. And frankly, you need 75% of the workforce by about 2022, which may scare you. That's only 5-6 years away. 75% of the American workforce will be millennial in nature. So we have to adapt. We have to adjust. Now, on the flip side of this, I want to put a bow on that really quick. Boomers, we just have to find ways to get more feedback. If you're interested in learning more about that, I want you to reach out through our website. We're going to be offering some webinars and some other resources over the next few months that will be relevant to baby boomer leaders in the workplace. We're going to help you through this problem. We have a program where we can come into your workplace called Thriving Across Generations and help you through some of those generational gap issues in the marketplace. Now, I've been beating up on the baby boomers a little bit and kind of saying, hey, it's your responsibility to guide the next generation and provide more feedback. That's not a cop-out for millennials to say, oh, I'm not getting enough feedback, so I don't have to perform. Friends, that's bullshit. As the millennial generation, what if we woke up tomorrow and all the boomers just decided to up and retire? Okay, let's just say that happened. What would happen to you? Where would your feedback loop come from? When the baby boomers eventually are retired and no longer in the workplace by around 2030, where is your feedback going to come from then? You need to take a good hard look at this. So here, I'm going to show you exactly where to go and find your feedback right now. Take a good hard look at your numbers. Take a good hard look at the level of success that you have been able to create in your business, in your work so far. Take a good hard look at how satisfied are you with your work personally, regardless of the feedback that you've gotten. What is the level? Scale of 1 to 10. How proud of you are you of yourself based on your current performance? The only feedback that any of us ever really truly needs is freaking results. Do you have the results that show that you have added epic value to your organization? And a lot of times we get people that want to come to our programs and there's a cost associated with that. And that employer has to think about this. Is this employee worth the investment? Is this employee worth the investment? And am I going to get a return on that investment? You are not entitled to training. You are not entitled to coaching. I'll even say this. You're not even entitled to feedback from your freaking boss because, in my opinion, it's your job to go out and create epic value in the company and earn the feedback. Earn the feedback. Now, along the way, you may have questions. You may have concerns. It's your job to go and ask those questions, right? And you may get the answers that you want. You may not get the answers that you want. But at the end of the day, when it boils down to it, what the world's asking you to do is to own up to your situation. And that may mean taking some risk. And maybe you don't get all the answers to the questions that you have. And so that when you make a decision in the workplace, you may be scared. It may hurt. You may be wondering, is this the right decision? Well, here's the reality. You're going to get a result if you make a decision and if you don't make a decision. So would you rather wait and hope that somebody's going to make the decision for you, or would you rather be in control of your destiny and just see how it pans out? So millennials are not off the hook here as it pertains to this feedback conversation, because my belief is, my friends, my fellow millennial friends, we need to go out and create this feedback loop for ourselves. Now, there's other ways you can get feedback by hiring a coach or finding mentors, other people that you can bounce your ideas off of. And we've got plenty of resources to help you learn more about that over at markjeweltraining.com. Check out the blog, check out some of our videos. And you can always check into like our Millennial Mastermind program or something like that to get some additional insights. But at the end of the day, it's your job to create your own feedback loop. Baby boomers, one of the best things that you can do before you retire is to put in place additional systems to help millennials gain greater levels of confidence, because effectively what we've done is we've reduced an entire generation's ability to make decisions, because baby boomers, while you were raising us, while you were creating us, smothering us with feedback and attention, you also, as a byproduct, reduced our ability to make decisions. And sometimes the making decision thing is hard. It was hard for you too. Imagine if you didn't build that muscle for the first 18 years of your life. You know, one of the other things that we all need to pay attention to is that across the country, and this is different based on the industry segment that you're in, but a lot of people are now not starting their first job until they're 18, 20, or maybe even 22. In previous, many people had a paper route, or they worked on a farm, or they had other responsibility where they may have been working, whether it was paid or unpaid, but managing the expectations of somebody else for 5 to 10 years before they ever got to their first real job with an hourly or salary type of pay. So there's a lot of cognitive development that goes into it. So if I don't get my first job until I'm 20 or 22, I now have 10 years to develop the cognitive mindset of what it truly takes to manage relationships, manage expectations of my boss, and take care of other people. It's in as much as you think it should be common sense, it's not. So if people don't have that job early on during their teen years, there's some cognitive development that's being missed out on. So pay attention to that as you look at the people that you hire that come into your organization. How much work experience did they have in high school, whether it was on the farm or whether it was elsewhere? That's a big deal as it pertains to how this person reacts in their first year, 2 years, 5 years on a job. So just in summary, my friends, the feedback loop is important. Boomers, understand millennials need more of it. It's part of your job to pass on all the knowledge of your generation and to create systems and programs and to get these guys into training and to help them get the feedback and coaching they need. Millennials, you're not off the hook. We've got to create the feedback loops for ourselves, because at the end of the day, 30 years from now, when we're starting to reach retirement age, all of the accountability is going to point to us, whether you get the feedback that you want from your boss this year or not. So the responsibility falls on our shoulders. Understand that things were different between our two generations, and what's going to happen is millennials are going to succeed. There's no option but succeeding. The difference, or the question is, how much fun will we have along the way, and how can we create our own feedback loops through coaching, through other resources, through each other, because at the end of the day, results will be the only thing that matters. So, my friends, this has been another episode of the Survivor's Guide to Thriving podcast. For more information, head on over to markjeweltraining.com. I hope you've learned a thing or two about the difference between boomers and millennials on this episode here today. We've got more tips and tricks for what it takes to go from surviving to thriving in life. Again, over at the website at www.markjeweltraining.com. Go ahead and take the free Thrive assessment while you're there, and that's just markjeweltraining.com/thrive, and it'll give you a little bit of feedback on some areas where you may be thriving and maybe some where you need a little bit of help. So with that, my friends, remember, survival is dead. It's your time to thrive today. Go get it.
Thanks for tuning in to the Survivor's Guide to Thriving podcast. You can find the show notes and links to all the resources mentioned in this episode by heading over to markjeweltraining.com/podcast. And if you feel so inclined, we'd love it if you could head over to iTunes and leave us a rating and review. That's what helps us move up in the charts so that more people can find us and start their surviving to thriving journey. See you next week.